Of Summer and the Tour de France 1991. It was a race with a big difference this year. In fact, only 10 big mountain passes to climb, and they all began at Pau, through the Pyrenees for 2 days and across the bottom of France, heading up towards the Alps and of course the famous climb of Alpe d'Huez. The 22 teams all selected by the World Points ranking systems, making up 198 riders, all hoping they would reach Paris. The distance, 3,900 kilometres, the days, 22. It all began in Lyon. Lyon, of course, a city that was on the very first Tour de France route back in 1903. And it went on, then from Lyon, it stayed for one circuit of 140.5 kilometres. The second part of a long day, 36.5 kilometres, a team time trial at nearby Bron. And then the race finally left Lyon, heading up towards Dijon, 210 kilometres there. On towards the Champagne capital at Reims, or Reims as we like to say, and then on from Reims to Valenciennes. The race was at the moment heading towards the northern Belgian borders, and then from there it headed across the part of Normandy and Brittany, through Le Havre, heading down to Argentan. The first big time trial was there after the 7th stage. The time trial, just 73 kilometres, but what a ride. From Alençon on towards Rennes, capital of Brittany if you're a cyclist, because it really is a hotbed of the sport. Out to the coast to Quimper, 207 kilometres, and then heading south towards the mountains to Saint-Herblain. Once you get to Saint-Herblain, there was a long plane trip taking the riders down to the Pyrenees and the gateway at the city of Pau, into Spain to Jaca, and then out of Spain to Val-Laurent. This was the stage everyone feared. Across the bottom of the valleys of France, where the little hills are steep and short, through Albi, where the weather is certain to be hot and sticky, on to Alès, and then the riders begin to head towards the Alps themselves, towards Gap, which is the gateway to the Alps this year, and then to Alpe d'Huez itself, which to every cyclist is a shrine. Around the borders of Switzerland and Italy, the race stays in the Alps, from Bourg-d'Oisans to Morzine. Then from Morzine, heading out to easier countryside, to Aix-les-Bains, and the beautiful lake that is there. The terrain now gets a little bit easier as the riders go back into wine country for a 57-kilometre penultimate day's time trial from Lugny to Mâcon, and then the last stage itself, the 22nd and final stage, taking the survivors to the Eiffel Tower in Paris. The Tour de France, a prize list of $1.7 million, was about to begin. The opening time trial, 5.4 kilometres, based in the centre of Lyon and the Parc de la Tête d'Or. Greg LeMond starting the Tour de France in yellow in defence of a championship he's won on 3 previous occasions. And Greg LeMond, who hadn't won a race all year, was bang on top of form yet again. The Tour de France, he loves it, and he comes home at the time with a time that was only to be 3 seconds slower than the fastest time of the day. Erik Breukink of Holland, expected to be the main challenger to Greg LeMond, he put in the expected time trial performance, and it was to beat LeMond by a single second. But the man who beat both of them was Thierry Marie, the French prologue specialist. He's twice before won the prologue in the Tour de France, and this was to be his 3 times win. Thierry Marie for the Castorama team came home with the best time, just 6 minutes 11 seconds, beating Breukink by 2 seconds, and with it, the first yellow jersey was going to a Frenchman. The French were not expected to do well in this Tour de France, but they've made the perfect start. Lyon was going a long way to lose its image as an industrial city and one with too much traffic, and on the first stage of the Tour de France it was 114.5 kilometres, based on the Parc de la Tête d'Or. It came back to the same start point, and Thierry Marie was again the Frenchman in the lead after a prologue. He'd done it twice before, remember. He was defending, of course, just a 2-second lead over Erik Breukink and a 3-second lead over Greg LeMond, but the whole field was only separated by a total of 53 seconds. Everybody was aware of this, and everybody said this opening stage was a difficult one, and sure enough there was a surprise. Remember a year ago when 4 riders broke clear? Well, there were more this time. There were in fact 11 of them, and one of them was Greg LeMond, making no mistakes this time. He was joined by the rider in green, Erik Breukink, and also Sean Kelly. The stars of the Tour de France appeared to be making a big mistake again on the opening stage. And watch the sprint here of Jamaluddin Abdu-Japarov winning a hotspot sprint. He was to become the demon sprinter of the Tour de France this year. Greg LeMond knew what he had done. He'd started a move, all because Ralph Yarman, the former champion of Switzerland riding his first Tour de France, had attacked very early on. They picked up Yarman, and between them they built a gap of over 2 minutes over the rest of the Tour de France. Had the big names in the Tour, with the exception of Breukink and Le Monde, made a mistake this time as well? In the sprint for the line, the world champion Rudy Darmans was leading out for the win. He too hadn't had a great year since winning the world title in Japan a year ago, and he wasn't about to win this stage either. The speedy legs of the Tashkent flyer Abdu Japarov came to the front. Sean Kelly, trying to win the stage on the right for the first time since 1982, was pipped to the line. In third place was Greg LeMond. Greg LeMond really was taking this Tour de France to heart already. The main field came in 1 minute and 44 seconds behind, and they were led home by Jean-Paul Van Poppel, the sprinter who was back to form. What a time gap at the end of the very first morning's road race. Greg LeMond was back in the yellow jersey, the colour of the Tour de France he loves so much.
Before you waste your money on another pair of prescription glasses, check out this mind-blowing invention. These self-adjustable glasses are taking the world...
Yellow jersey, the colour of the Tour de France he loves so much. With a break of only some 3 hours, the riders moved to the outskirts of Lyon to Bron for the 36.5 kilometres team time trial. And it was here where the world champion Rudy Darlans was leading the Panasonic team to what was to be the third best time of the day.
Right, going to start from the second.
Controversy was already rife in the Tour de France because at the start line, in fact, Stephen Roche had failed to arrive in time with his team. The team had gone without him. Roche rode the course alone and was later eliminated from the Tour de France. The 1987 winner was out after virtually the opening weekend was only just about over. The Panasonics arrived with the best time at that moment, but not too far further along the road was the Castorama team, led by Laurent Fignon, Luc Leblanc, and of course the man who'd lost his yellow jersey in the morning, Thierry Marie. They were to set a better time than Panasonics, but it wasn't going to be good enough to give them back the yellow jersey. And it was Thierry Marie who brought the Castorama team home. But not too far further back along the course, Ariostia were in all sorts of trouble. A mistake by one of the riders, and a number of them fell on the final bend. One of them was Rolf Sorensen, sixth in the morning's road race, and hoping to be the leader of the Tour de France by the end of this time trial. The team finished without him. Sorensen had to limp home with his handlebars twisted, but he did take the leader's yellow jersey by just 10 seconds away from Greg LeMond, a Danish leader of the Tour de France, and that doesn't happen too often. The very next day was stage 3, the riders riding 210.5 kilometres from Villeurbanne, which is just outside of Lyon, to Dijon, the mustard capital of France. These flat stages concern many of the riders, but they should have been a feast for the sprinters. One sprinter is Etienne de Wilde. He didn't wait for the finish though. A kilometre from the line he leapt clear of the field, and they never caught him again till the finish. On to stage 4, and away from the mustard capital we headed up to Reims, the capital of the Champagne countryside. A long way, 286 kilometres, and again the sprinters were hoping to have their day. On the line, Jamaluddin Abdu Japarov, a name to be noted. He never won a race last year. He was having a great season this time though. Maurizio Fondriest was soon leading the attack again next day. This time we were heading away from Reims up to Valenciennes. All of the time now the race was moving up towards the borders of Belgium. The wind was blowing and the weather was surprisingly warm. The big danger though is the many roundabouts now being built in France. The tight roads, the many twists, and the result, a lot of crashes. There was great concern here, the organisation saying they no longer feel that they can consider some of the city centres for finishes because they are simply becoming too dangerous with the street signage. A number of riders were down, but the one rider that unfortunately all of the cameras missed was the crash of the yellow jersey Rolf Sorensen. He fell on a very sharp bend. He went down a ditch, he climbed back, he took the bike of a teammate, Bruno Kenglialta, and when he finished, they all hadn't realised at first that in fact Sorensen had fallen at all. He'd finished the stage with a broken collarbone. The leader of the Tour de France had finished, but he was not going to start again next day. The field split up on the road into Valenciennes, and it was the ideal opportunity for the Dutchman Jelle Nijdam to take the stage. He's a specialist in presenting the surprise in the final kilometre, and he did just that as the race came up towards the line. Jelle Nijdam slipped away, threw his arms in the air, but this was the story of the day. The sad sight of Rolf Sorensen of Denmark out of the Tour de France. And the very next morning the new leader was Greg LeMond. But in true Tour tradition, Greg LeMond refused to pull on the leader's yellow jersey. As far as Greg was concerned, the vacancy was now open.
Je crois que c'est pas un bon geste si j'ai mis le maillot. C'est pas comme ça, je veux prendre le maillot et je peux perdre comme ça.
Officially, Greg LeMond was only in second place in the Tour de France, 9 seconds behind Rolf Sorensen, who was no longer, of course, with the Tour de France. LeMond was now racing to regain the yellow jersey. But so too was Thierry Marie. With the second longest successful escape in the history of the Tour de France, over 230 kilometres, Marie was back in yellow at Le Havre. It was even nicer. He wasn't too far from where he actually lived. The next day, with the Castorama team all around him, protecting him, Thierry Marie surprisingly back in yellow. Nobody really expected that. The race went on its crashing way towards the finishing line at Argentan. But in a sprint of 185 riders, Jean-Paul Van Poppel was the winner of the stage. The sprinter, it seemed, was also back on form. The yellow jersey, though, remained now on the shoulders of Thierry Marie. Because of that long breakaway of 235 kilometres, Marie was far too tired in the first big time trial of the Tour de France, the 73 kilometres from Argentan down to Alençon, to defend his overall lead. At the start of the time trial, he led the Tour de France by 59 seconds ahead of Jamaluddin Abdu-Japarov. But by the end of the time trial, he was going to be out of the running. Number 11 was Claudio Chiappucci, the rider who couldn't ride a time trial 1 year ago when finishing second to Greg LeMond in the Tour de France. My, how much he's improved now. Chiappucci came home in the end.
Book in the hotels.com app to find your perfect somewhere.
Blah, 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 blah. Jeez.
You were made to commune with the gods. We were made to tell you when prices drop back to earth.
End for 19th place, but he conceded more than 4 minutes, the rider who was eventually to win the time trial. Laurent Fignon, it seems, really was coming back towards good form. He was fighting all of the way. So too was Raoul Alcala, who won the first time trial in the Tour de France a year ago. He caught and passed here Olaf Ludwig, the rider who won the Green Points jersey just 1 year ago. But all of the riders to beat were coming at the end of the field. The champion of Italy, Gianni Bugno, the rider everybody said would be the next man to win the Tour de France. Eric Breukink, 2 top time trial wins last year in the Tour de France and leading all the way in this one until the last 10 kilometres, and then he hit the wall. Jean-Francois Bernard, a new team for him this year, riding for the Benesto team to help Miguel Indurain and Pedro Delgado. And it seemed too that Jean-Francois Bernard had refound his old self. He produced the third fastest time of the day. And what about the American, Greg LeMond, who is further back on the course? Greg LeMond now was hoping to again become the leader of the Tour de France. He is producing time checks all the way along that were threatening to be just that, the best times of the day. The crowds were now enormous. This is the hotbed of cycling in France, and the Bretons just love to be out. Brittany and Normandy are where all the top bike riders always seem to come from. Greg LeMond was once again his old self, riding a time trial just like he did a couple of years ago when he won the race on the Champs-Élysées. Roger Legier knew his man was on a good ride, and LeMond was, as they say, burying himself. He was heading towards the finish with the best time of the day, but it wasn't to be the best time of the day when the last man to finish came home. The legs of the rider everybody was beginning to talk about, Miguel Indurain, the handsome Spaniard. Miguel Indurain was setting the best time all the way along the course. Once Eric Breukink blew up, Miguel Indurain was taking charge, and by the finish he'd done the best time, 1 hour 35 minutes and 44 seconds. 8 seconds better than LeMond, but LeMond was in yellow by 1 minute and 13 seconds. The race continued its rather flat route as it went away from Argentin and Alençon and headed out towards Rennes. Stage 9, 161 kilometres, carried the riders from Alençon to Rennes. Again, the riders were looking for escapes. They were looking for a big gap that might well close the gap of that very first day escape that had built a big bridge between Greg LeMond and Eric Breukink. The peloton now were 1 minute 45 seconds behind, but in this lead group, there really weren't too many riders that would worry Greg LeMond. Up towards the finishing line, and Brazil don't win too many stages in any race in the world, and never before in the Tour de France. Mauro Ribeiro, riding for the RMO team, took his chance and won his stage. Certainly the happiest moment in the life of the Brazilian Mauro Ribeiro. The next day, rumour was rife as the riders began to ride away towards Quimper, 207 kilometres. The PDM team were in all kinds of trouble. Not starting the stage, Nico Verhoeven and Uwe Raab, and soon after the stage started, the majority of the riders were riding behind the race. Martin Early of Ireland was about to retire. Eric Breukink was rumoured to have a fever, so too Sean Kelly. The riders were all saying they had a form of food poisoning. Despite this trouble at the back, there was a breakaway of 4 going clear. Phil Anderson from Motorola, the Australian, Nico Emmons, Brian Home and Michel Dernice from the Wyman squad sitting at the back here. He was the winner of the Tour of Britain 1 year ago. Anderson was searching for his first ever stage win since 1982, and he certainly was having a great season, arguably indeed his best ever season since turning professional. The breakaway built time as they headed down towards the finish at Quimper, although as we watched Phil Anderson sprint for victory, I have to say everybody was talking about the PDM team. What on earth had gone wrong with them? Anderson made the sprint a formality. Almost 10 years on, he's again a stage winner in the Tour de France, but it wasn't going to affect the overall situation. And they only just survived as well by a handful of seconds. After almost 5.5 hours of racing, the main field almost had them. Happy days for Phil Anderson, but the same could not be said for the PDM team. The rumour was, in fact, as Volkswagen arrived, eliminated from the race, but he was determined to continue to the finish. The former East German world champion did arrive, but was eliminated. Martin Early got back on his bike just to say hi to the journalists and say he had a fever in excess of 40 degrees. Martin Early climbed out the sag wagon to ride away to his hotel. It was goodbye to the PDM team. Nobody quite knew what was wrong, but it was later said to be problems with intravenous injection of liquid food. 1,900 kilometres had now been completed in the Tour de France, and 11 stages had been covered. The riders now faced a long plane transfer down to the gateway to the Pyrenees. This was the overall situation, and remembering that the PDM team had riders in 3rd, 6th and 9th places, they were no longer in the race. Greg LeMond was leading the Tour de France by 51 seconds from Jamaluddin Abdou-Japarov. In 3rd place was the Spanish rider Miguel Indurain, 4th Jean-Francois Bernard, and 5th Gianni Bugno. Of the other fancied names, Luc Leblanc was in 6th place but 4 minutes plus back. Pedro Delgado was 8th, Laurent Fignon 11th, Claudio Chiappucci 18th, and the American Andy Hampsten 37th. The 2 days in the Pyrenees had special significance in this year's rather flat race, and stage 12 took the riders from Pau into the Spanish city of Jaca, 192 kilometres. And by the time the riders began the descent of the Col de Soudet after 83.5 kilometres, Greg LeMond was in a field that was chasing down a group of riders. He was almost 4 minutes behind. Pascal Richard, the Swiss rider, had gone over the top of the Soudet in 1st place, and he was chased by Andy Hampsten, Luc Leblanc, Jan Nevens, and this rider here, Maurizio Fondriest. So there was Luc Leblanc, the Frenchman, who was out to deliver a big surprise in this year's Tour de France, and Andy Hampsten also hoped he could deliver one as well. Greg LeMond was again on the defensive, and he was finding he had no friends in the Tour de France except his own teammates, and the best friend of all was this rider at the front, Gilbert Duclos-Lasalle, the grand man of the Tour de France and a very, very useful ally for Greg LeMond. So while the Z team chased behind, the leaders kept the rhythm up. They went over the Col d'Icher. Pascal Richard was again first over that, led by Andy Hampsten, and then came the climb of the Col du Somport, this coming at around 160 kilometres and taking the riders into Spain. Greg LeMond couldn't understand it. Nobody else seemed interested in chasing the group ahead. Miguel Indurain, Pedro Delgado, Marina Lajareta, Gianni Bugno, they all sat and watched. and Greg LeMond had to do all of the work, or his team did. This side is France, the other side of the building is Spain, and it was a Frenchman who was carrying the Tour de France into Spain. Luc Leblanc was going over the top of the Col de Saint-Paul with a lead of 16 seconds over Pascal Richard and the white jersey of Charlie Motte. Andy Hampston was fourth, 1 minute and 5 seconds back, and the main field, including Greg LeMond, were an enormous 7 minutes and 15 seconds behind. Now, once you enter Spain here, it is literally all downhill to Jaca. There was no chance now that this group wouldn't win the day. The question was, could the main field regroup and chase them down, or at least save some time? Greg LeMond was a little bit confused now. No
day in the mountains today, but you almost predicted what happened a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it's basically everybody in the peloton's racing